The following deck tag is brought to you by Dragon's Shield, the best sleeves in the business, and of course also thank you CARDMARKET. Check out the link in the description below if you wanna try out CARDMARKET for the first time in Europe. Buy yourself a booster or get some free singles. Just check it out in the description below how you can contact me. A control deck always plays a little bit more lands, so in this case we will play 25. 8 poisonous Phyrexian islands and also 8 swamps. Any black and white control deck needs a Dismal Backwater. We play 2 and also 2 Temples of Deceit. We also play the Dross Pits that we can throw away to get some cards, as well as Surgical Bay. Next up, a Mirrex to make some Phyrexian tokens that can deal poison damage. Also an Evolving Wilds, and last but not least on this slide, a Crawling Barrens. This land can become a creature, and that's good in the late game. Now this team is toxic, this deck is toxic, and we have some toxic cards that give poison counters to our opponent. Now when a player has 10 poison counters, he loses the game. So once the first poison counter is placed, we need to have more poison counters, and we can do that by proliferating. Cards like Tekutal have you even proliferate twice. The Flux Channeler is also a great proliferate card in this deck to get more poison counters on your opponent. Now we also have a lot of toxic creatures in the deck. Let's have a look at the toxic creatures. We start with Venser Corpse Puppet. This is a lifelinker with Toxic 1. And Void Wing Hybrid also has Toxic 1, and when you proliferate you can return it to your hand from the graveyard. The Mirrex is a land that can create Phyrexian Might artifact creatures, and they also have Toxic. Now we also play Toxic sorceries and instants. Infectious Inquiry is the first one that have us draw some cards and also have our opponent get a poison counter. Prologue to Phyrexis does the same thing. The Vraska Skull has our opponent sacrifice a creature and gain a poison counter. Now let's proliferate with the following cards. Flux Channeler is great because we play a lot of non-creature spells, and whenever we do, we proliferate. And when we have Tekutal in play, we will proliferate twice. Drumming Bird also deals damage and proliferates, so great small attacker. And the Mesmerizing Dose is removal that, you guessed it, proliferates. Proliferating and drawing cards we can find with Contentious Plan, and of course our new card Experimental Augury. The following 2 cards that proliferate are more defensive. Serum Snare bounces a permanent, and the next one is a counterspell Reject Imperfection, and they both proliferate. Now this is a budget deck, but we do play Vraska Betrayal's Sting. This great Planeswalker also proliferates and it draws us a card. And as it's a Planeswalker, it also gains an extra loyalty counter when it proliferates. Its -2 ability is also quite strong because it turns a creature into a treasure token. And its -9 ability gives your opponent 9 poison counters, so you can proliferate for the win. We also play a few other creatures that are just great in this deck. Let's start with Archmage Emeritus. We play a lot of instant and sorceries, and that's a lot of card draw. And if you proliferate, you need to have Scheming Aspirant. This one is a win condition on its own in this deck, and we play 4 copies. And Echtai Resurrected is just an all-around good removal card in blue and black. Now, if you know my channel, you know that I like to spice it up with some crazy cards in our decks. Triskelion is a great card in a Proliferate deck. And of course, I needed to play Toxrill the Corrosive because this card gives -1/-1 counters. So proliferating with this big slug equals having your opponent's creatures die slowly from poison. Any control deck has to have some good card draw, and these card draw cards I chose for the deck. Distorted Curiosity is a card you haven't seen on my slides. 2 cards are drawn for 1 mana, an Experimental Augury, and the last one, Infectious Inquiry, I already showed. For the removal, I play a lot of spot removal with Anoint with Affliction, great card to exile creatures. Mesmerizing Dose also proliferates, so I added 1 copy of this card, as well as Serum Snare to bounce any permanent. And the last one is a Vraska's Fall. This one adds poison counters and can also have your opponent sacrifice. For the Countermagic, I kept it simple. I play 2 Reject Imperfection, counter target spell, if it's mana value 3 or less, Proliferate. Bring the Ending is a counter spell that in this deck costs only 2 mana. We are almost at the end of the video, but I also want to show you some artifacts that are great in this deck. Briber's Purse is great to keep your opponent's creatures at bay, because with the Proliferate mechanic you will put a lot of counters on it. The next one isn't really in line with the Proliferate team, but it's just a great mass removal spell in this deck. Niverniral's Disc is old school, but it does the trick and it doesn't hit Planeswalkers. The last artifact is a Midnight Clock, great with the Proliferate mechanic to draw a bunch of cards. And I want to end this flavorful budget control deck with a nice budget Planeswalker. Mordenkainen is a great one. It can draw you cards and create some big dog blue illusion creature tokens. Now the final ability, the ultimate -10, is exchange your hand and library, then shuffle. You get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size, and when you do that you will probably have a lot of mana to play a lot of poison counters on your opponent. Now that's what I call finishing it off with style. And the best thing about this deck is that you can build it for under $50 US, under 40 euros I would say. Great deck, fun for the control player. Do build it, play it, and let me know in the comments how many opponents you poisoned. Always keep it casual. Bye.